Level by Level Gaming, and this is going to be the second video in my series of rescuing trashed Super Nintendo games. Now, if you haven't seen that video, I will leave a link somewhere up here for you to go back and watch that, and you can see where this journey began. Now, just a quick recap is a plastic bag was given to me with 16 seriously neglected Super Nintendo games. They had been left in a shed that had collapsed. They were getting rained on, and actually much worse, there was one of these carts that actually had something living inside of it. So stay tuned, and I will cover that in a later video in this series. But this video, I'm going to show you some of my successes, some of my failures, and we will go over what was actually in the bag, some of my favorite games in here, some of the gems that I was able to rescue. In future videos, we will discuss a little bit about where I'm going with some of the ones that need some serious help, much more than just cleaning. So without further ado, let's get into this stack here, which I'm going to call the middle ground, or the games starting with the worst condition of the label. All these games ended up working, and they're just like middle of the pack. So this game here, I don't know if you can actually tell from the label, it is pretty far gone, but you can just barely make out the shape of that space bug and R-Type right up here in the corner. So if you're very familiar with Super Nintendo games, you might have picked that up from just what little bit you can see, and you can also see IREM up in the corner here. So this was R-Type, a very good game. I have a copy of this floating around somewhere in my collection I've had for a very long time. Still a really good find. We've got WrestleMania. I don't have a lot of experience with this game, but I was very excited to have this one work because I don't have a copy of this in my collection. So WrestleMania. Wheel of Fortune, I guess it had its place in gaming history, and if you were playing your Super Nintendo with your family back in the day, this Wheel of Fortune, which is the deluxe edition, might have been a decent game to have in your library. And sticking with the games you play with your family, we've got a board game classic here. We've got Parker Brothers Monopoly. So like I said, I'm just progressing through this stack of games that I was able to get working 100% from the worst label here to the best. There's no particular order in how good these games are, but if you were a sports fan in the 1990s, particularly 1994, Madden might have been at the top of your list of one of your favorite Super Nintendo games. Moving on, this was literally the first one I think that I got going, I got to work, because if you remember in the first video, SimCity was a failure and Mighty Morphin Power Rangers was a success. And I had a really good friend growing up that was a super fan of Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. So Lee, if you're out there, this video is for you, or this game rather in this video is for you, brother. All right. Now, this game coming up next was very nostalgic for me. I have my copy I've had of this since I was a kid, and I love this game. Going back and playing it as an adult, it's those rose-colored glasses, that effect that you get whenever you remember something being much better than it actually is. But I really enjoyed this as a kid, and I'm not sure if I know where my copy of this is. I'm sure it's packed up somewhere, but not laying hands on my copy in a while. Getting this in the bag with a very decent condition, and being able to get this to work was a treat into itself. Now, the back label on this wasn't great, but the front label was just fine, and the game plays as it should, and I really did enjoy this game. So, moving on, we've got this last game here, Yoshi's Safari, and the reason I saved this for last not just because it has a very good label and the plastics come out good, and it works 100%. This is another one of those games like Mario Paint here that I do not have a Super Scope. I didn't have one growing up. I never picked one up in my journeys. So between Yoshi's Safari and Mario Paint here, I am going to have to go on a journey to get some peripherals for these games. Now, that being the mouse and the Super Scope. So that is the stack of games that I'm going to call, like I said, middle ground. They all work 100%. Now, something they have in common, except for Yoshi's Safari here, this had a different board set in it. All of these that came together really easily and cleaned really well and worked right off the bat without being finicky or anything. They all have this simple 1990 model PCB board, and I will get to some pictures right now and show you some differences in those boards. So what I did here is I laid out a sampling of the different boards that I encountered whenever I was taking these apart and cleaning them. And you can see, starting from the bottom, you have the early 90s and the more simple PCB boards with just a couple chipsets on them, going all the way up to the late 90s at the very top there with the complicated PCB boards and the different types of chips, multiple chips. And then through the middle you can see that there are some of these PCBs that have batteries, and by far the ones that worked every single time, that all it took was a simple cleaning, were the simple PCBs. And then the further you climbed up the ladder there, the less success that I had initially. Now that we've covered some of the various boards that were inside of these games, I will now cover what I'm going to call the top or the upper tier of the games that I found in the bag that were a success, that work really well. And that is going to be, the first one here is going to be the movie version of the Flintstones. Now, depending on what source you cite on the internet, this game has various levels of rarity to it. It's not in that middle pack that I showed earlier in this video. This is what I would call an upper tier game, and not just because of what it is, but the game looks really good when you're playing it. It has good reviews, and it is an all-around solid platformer by Ocean. Now, whether you agree or disagree, hit me in the comments. Let me know what you think. But this was what I consider to be one of the better finds. The plastics came out really nice. The label did really well. It's almost 100% intact. The back label isn't that bad, but like I said, the plastics, even the backs of these all the backs of these were bad in this lot. They were yellowed. I guess the way that it was sitting in the box, all that stuff, it was down or something, but the backs were in far worse condition on these games than the fronts, and all the plastic came out really nice and clean and clear on this, along with the label. So this is going to be top tier, and you can't have a Super Nintendo collection without having Super Metroid. And look how crisp that label stayed intact despite all the abuse that it suffered. And the plastics came out really clean. This is a solid game. It speaks for itself. And I do have a copy of this in my collection that was mine, that I've had since I was a kid, but it was really cool to have such a good copy cleaned up and working out of a bag of trashed Super Nintendo games. Now, this game, as you know, was the game that I picked out of the bag in the very first video, and this was the game that I wanted to save the most. This game right here. So this video is already getting long. I'm going to make a part 3 of fixing or rescuing trash Super Nintendo games, and when I make that part 3, I'm going to show you what happened with this game. I'm going to show you the process and the journey, because this game was really special. It was something I was really hyped to have, and this game, you're going to have to wait and see whether this was a accomplishment or a failure. And also in that video, I will cover what my plans are with some of my other games here that I'm going to go ahead and reveal were complete losses at this point, some worse than others. And I will also share what I plan to do to try to fix these games here. So if you like my videos, please hit the like button, subscribe, hit me with the comments, let me know what you think, and stay tuned for part 3 where I cover Mario RPG and the future for some of these other games. Thanks for watching.